This route is really known for the dramatic landscapes. So you've got cliffs and craggy coastlines with lots of rock formations and stuff. And you're going to see like castle ruins and sheep farms and tiny cottages and little colorful villages. So many of the very famous spots in Ireland are on the Wild Atlantic Way, like the cliffs of Moher and Galway. It's the whole coast. You can do part of it. You could do all of it if you wanted to make an entire road trip out of it. If you're road tripping, probably you're gonna wanna stay in some of the smaller towns because that's where all the charm is in Ireland. It really just feels like you're being welcomed into someone's home.
That's the best way to get into the culture, and it helps you to take the time to actually do that and meet people. Why do they call it wild?
Some parts of it are super remote, so you got these like narrow roads and it's kind of takes some time to get to some of the sites. And also just the landscape is very wild feeling. You've got these like really craggy coastlines and like dramatic cliffs and sheep farms and castle ruins and all these things that just kind of evoke that untouched, untouristy side of Ireland.
It feels like the perfect place to go write like a crime thriller or a romance. I'm a tortured writer and I just want to feel the salty breeze and wind in my hair.
If you're starting a road trip and like you've never driven in Ireland before.
Amanda Williams, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about the Wild Atlantic Way in Ireland today. So give us some background. What is it?
So the Wild Atlantic Way is literally just the entire west coast of Ireland. And the tourism board kind of designated it as this like scenic driving route in, I think, 2014. And decided this was just a great way to promote like all the kind of landscapes and coastline and everything on the west coast.
It's not really one route that you have to drive from start to finish, right?
No, it's 2,600 kilometers long, which is equivalent to 1,600 miles.
Okay.
So it's long. So you definitely do not have, it's not like a specific route that you must drive the entire thing in order to experience it. It's kind of just, it's the whole coast. You can do part of it. You could do all of it if you wanted to make an entire road trip out of it.
How many days would it take if you did the whole thing?
I mean, if you wanted to actually stop and see everything, I'd say probably at least you'd want a week.
Okay.
Maybe more. Maybe like 7 to 10 days. And you could certainly make lots of stops, see all the landscapes and the sights and the castles and all the things.
Why do they call it wild? Why not just the Atlantic Way?
Some parts of it are super remote, so you got these like narrow roads and it's kind of takes some time to get to some of the sites. And also just the landscape is very wild feeling. You've got these like really craggy coastlines and like dramatic cliffs and sheep farms and castle ruins and all these things that just kind of evoke that kind of untouched, untouristy side of Ireland.
It feels windswept and wild and your hair's blowing in the wind.
Always in Ireland.
Of course, right? Let's talk about how you travel it, because it can be a road trip, right?
So a road trip is going to be the most popular way to do it just because, like I said, there are so many sites and things you can do where you want the freedom to be able to say, okay, not interested in this, but I do want to see that and that sort of thing. But if driving in Ireland is not your thing, there are other ways to do it. So there are plenty of guided tours, like if you want to do that focus more on the West Coast and all the sites along there. I've done some like multi-day bus tours or like small group trips in Ireland. So that's totally doable. Usually on those, you'll go to other places too that aren't just the Wild Atlantic Way. But I feel like so many of the very famous spots in Ireland are on the Wild Atlantic Way, like the cliffs of Moher and Galway and all those things that you would want to see anyway. You can also just do like day trips to certain parts of it from Dublin or Cork or any other of the major cities in Ireland. So like if you just wanted to get a little taste of it, you could do a day trip to like the cliffs of Moher or Dingle or the Ring of Kerry, that sort of thing. Ireland is not very big. You can get from Dublin to the West Coast, where the Wild Atlantic Way is, in about 3 hours in a car. So it's not like a 8-hour drive to get to something. So absolutely you could do a day trip and kind of experience a small slice of it if you wanted to. And then if you're super adventurous, you could bike all of the Wild Atlantic Way or parts of it.
Oh my goodness.
You could hike it. Yes, there are so many different ways to experience it.
Okay. And if people are thinking about kind of heading out there in a car, let's say, they're not
Right.
going to stay in Dublin and day trip out, where would they stay? B&Bs, hotels? What's going on out there?
Yeah, so there are some slightly larger cities, towns on the West Coast. So Galway would be like the biggest one, where you're going to have your typical like chain hotels and that sort of thing. But honestly, if you're road tripping, probably you're going to want to stay in some of the smaller towns because that's where all the charm is in Ireland. And so in that case, my favorite places to stay are kind of like the bed and breakfasts or the guest houses, which are basically B&Bs, but sometimes they won't come with breakfast if it's just like a guest house. But those are often just like regular people's houses where they maybe have some extra rooms and so they've turned it into a guest house. So I've stayed at some where they have like 3 guest rooms, you know, so it really just feels like you're being welcomed into someone's home and they're very cozy. So yeah, B&Bs and guest houses are my favorite places to stay.
Yeah, I feel like that's the best way to kind of get into the culture and
Yes.
and it helps you to take the time to actually do that and meet people.
Absolutely. And like the people who own the guest houses are sometimes the best people to ask about, okay, well, what's the best pub in town? Where's the best place to like hear live music or to get a really good meal? So yeah, they're always going to have those tips as well. But then there are sometimes these like quirky places you can stay as well. There's this one lighthouse, the Fanad, where if you book far enough in advance, I think there are certain times of year where you can actually book like the room in the lighthouse, like the light keepers quarters or whatever, and you can stay there.
That sounds fun. When we went, we stayed in a castle, and I feel like that's probably on many people's bucket list.
Absolutely.
So do you have any recommendations for castles or
Yeah.
estates where people can stay?
Totally. So if you want to go super duper fancy, Ashford Castle is a pretty famous one. It is up near Westport. It's a little bit off the, official coast. It's a little bit inland, but it is one of those just like beautiful, absolutely stunning castles where you can stay overnight. They now, it's a hotel and like wedding venue and that sort of thing now. But it used to just be like some family's house. But now it's a super fancy castle. You can also just book afternoon tea there. I've never stayed at Ashford Castle, but I have gone to tea there, which is
You're the
excellent.
expert on afternoon teas too.
I love a good afternoon tea.
I know.
If you want something a little less fancy but still a castle, I've stayed at Ballyseede Castle, which is further south near the town of Tralee.
Okay.
Which again is a little bit inland from the coast, but not that far off like where you would be driving. And that again is like a castle hotel / event venue now. But super beautiful. They've got like suits of armor and like all the old like patterned everything like curtains and rugs and wall tapestries. And they also have Irish wolfhounds that live at this castle.
Oh, and
like the
I feel like
official
those are the
dogs.
largest
They are
dogs.
massive.
Some
They're
of the
like-
largest dogs that there are, if not the
Yes,
largest dog
They're
breed.
super, they've got to be at least like 4 feet tall, just standing normally.
Yes.
The Ballyseede Castle was very, very memorable. I stayed there on a trip with my mom and my sister. And they actually had a room with like 3 beds, which is great if you're like traveling with more than just a couple. So they do have like family sized rooms and the wolfhounds and the beautiful gardens and yeah. So, and it was very affordable as well.
If someone were to do the whole route, what would you, like, where is the start and the end specifically?
So it starts way, way up in the north on the west coast at Malin Head, and then it goes all the way along the coast to Kinsale, which is in just outside of Cork. You could start either way up north. If you're going to start in the northern part, probably the closest city would actually be Derry / Londonderry, depending on who you're speaking to in Northern Ireland. And then in the south, Cork is like the closest big city to where the coast route starts.
So for people who are coming in internationally, where can they fly into to do this route?
Right. So Dublin is going to be the most likely option because it is the largest airport, the main city. And like I said, from Dublin to the west coast in a car takes around 3 hours, maybe a little more if you hit some traffic. Not terrible. But the other option would actually be to fly into Shannon, which is the Shannon Airport is near Limerick, which is on the west coast. So if you wanted to get like a quick start, the Shannon Airport is also a lot smaller. It's a lot less stressful to drive out of there. If you're starting a road trip and like you've never driven in Ireland before, Shannon's a great place to start.
So if we're going to do like a virtual drive right now for the listeners from one end to the other, What scenery are we going to see?
This route is really known for the dramatic landscapes. So you've got cliffs and like these craggy coastlines with lots of rock formations and stuff. And you're going to see like castle ruins and sheep farms and tiny cottages and little colorful villages. But so up north is more where you're going to see the cliffs. So the cliffs are kind of the first half of it. And then as you continue further south, it's more of those like really dramatic coastlines with bays and beaches. It's going to be very green.
Very green.
Very green everywhere in Ireland. They don't call it the Emerald Isle for nothing.
So let's just get down into safe driving in Ireland, because if you're coming from the US, as many of our listeners are, this is going to be different.
Yes.
This is a different kind of driving. This is the other side of the road. And so if you've never done it before, there are some tips.
Yes. So yes, you're going to be the opposite side of the road and the opposite side of the car. So you're going to be sitting on the right-hand side of the car, driving on the left-hand side of the road. So it can be very daunting, for sure. I will say I've driven this way in several countries around the world. Your brain does adjust like quicker than you would expect.
Okay.
As long as you just remind yourself when you're making turns, like stay left.
Yeah.
Stay left. Chances are your rental car will have like stickers everywhere that remind you also to stay left. I will say that if you are not a super confident driver, Ireland can be sometimes a challenge. And especially on this route, if you're just going to the very popular touristy spots, like if you just want to go see the cliffs of Moher, maybe like Dingle or Ring of Kerry, like in the south, the roads are easy. Like they're paved, they're well marked, it's easy to follow. But some of the places, especially the further up north that you go, that are a little bit more remote, the roads can be very narrow, very windy. They might technically be a 2-lane road, like with a line in the middle, but it's not wide enough for 2 cars. And you've driven in Ireland,
yes.
So.
Yes, there are a lot of surprises about that. And,
Yes.
and even in the car that you rent. So a lot of cars there are manual. So
Yes.
if you don't know how to drive a manual, which I don't, you want to make sure when you rent your car that you are
Absolutely.
requesting an automatic.
Automatic. It will be a little bit more expensive, but like it's not uncommon for people to want automatic cars. So like don't feel weird.
Right.
About requesting one. But yes, definitely make sure you have one. And I would also say, depending on how large your group is, rent the smallest car possible.
Yes, I was going to say that, because if you're just going to the Cliffs of Moher,
Yes.
then okay,
It's fine.
you
Doesn't
can
matter.
you can drive an SUV. I know when I rent a car in the US, I'm like, let me have the big one. Give me the Suburban. Like, let's get something big. You do not want to drive a Suburban
Absolutely not.
on the wild Atlantic
Like we
way.
said, the roads sometimes can be very narrow. Parking spaces are tinier. In general, cars in Europe are just smaller. The SUV is not popular in Europe. So yeah, you want the smallest car possible. Also, some of those narrow roads are not only narrow, but they have these rock walls on both sides of them. So there's nowhere to go.
No.
Sometimes, you have a rock wall coming at you on one side and a bus coming at you on another, and you just have to
There's a lot of holding your breath and
just think thin and
hold your breath and just hope for the best. I think, knowing what I know now, having done a week-long self-driven road trip, I probably would be more inclined to do guided trips, get a driver, or take day trips, something like that, just because it was pretty nerve-wracking for us.
Yeah, and see, for me, like I've driven myself in Ireland, and it didn't bother me as much because I do just like the freedom of having your own car. But like I said, it really depends on you and like how confident of a driver you are or how nervous of a driver you tend to be at home. We don't want to scare anyone off though.
No,
because,
no, it's doable.
Absolutely.
We did it.
Yes.
My husband said he adjusted very quickly to being on the other side. I think it was me that was not adjusting to being on the side of the car and him driving. So that's something to keep in mind too. Another thing, we found this out about 5 days into our trip that we thought our car insurance would be covering this, and it absolutely was not by the time our insurance provider got back to us and told us. So figure that out before you go, right?
Yes. So if you have a credit card that has car rental insurance, which a lot of us probably do if you travel a lot, if you read the terms and conditions, it actually states in there that Ireland is one of the countries that is not covered under that car rental policy. So yes, if you're renting a car in Ireland, highly suggest paying for the insurance like through the car rental company. I find that in general in lots of Europe, car rentals aren't quite as expensive as they are in the US. So adding on that insurance coverage doesn't really make the price that much worse.
Let's talk about some of the stops along the way. What are the things that you absolutely have to see?
Up north where it starts, up in County Donegal, like I said, close to Derry/Londonderry. The first point up there where it actually starts is Malin Head, which is on the Inishowen Peninsula. And so that's just a very pretty scenic spot. And if you wanted to go to the actual starting point of the official Wild Atlantic Way, that's where you would go. And then kind of coming down the coast, it's just going to be a lot of very dramatic scenery. It just basically hugs the coast as best as it can using whatever roads exist.
So it's more of a conglomeration of roads that you turn here. It's you don't want to think of it as I'm on a highway going straight. Right.
Correct.
You got to keep an eye on the signs and
yes. It's not like a Route 66 where it's just one road marked 66 the entire way, which is how the Route 66 used to be. There are signs like telling you like you're on the Wild Atlantic Way.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But so as you continue south, I think the next notable point would be the Sleeve Cliffs, which are actually the tallest sea cliffs in Europe.
Even taller than the Cliffs of Moher.
Even taller.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And there are some hiking trails there. So if you wanted to go for a hike or a walk, depending on what kind of trip you're having, that's a really good place to go for a kind of coastal walk. Then next, you're going to come down to Donegal Bay and the town of Sligo. So Sligo there's lots of, they're known for seafood, oysters especially. And also, like, there's some good places to listen to live music if you want to do, like, traditional music stuff there. A little bit further down the coast, there is a popular kind of photo spot called Downpatrick Head, where there's a just famous, like, sea stack off the coast that people stop and take photos of. Going a little bit further south, you're going to get to Achill Island and Clew Bay, which is one of my favorite places on the Wild Atlantic Way. Achill Island is, like, almost like everything in the Wild Atlantic Way in one spot. You know, you've got like some cliffs, you've got some absolutely gorgeous beaches. Like if you have not seen beaches in Ireland, Scotland, anywhere like that, you would be blown away at how blue the water can be and how white the sand can be.
It almost gives Caribbean vibes if you didn't know where you were.
Yes.
You know, if you kind of took it out of context.
If you just took a picture and didn't show all the people in their like rain jackets and beanies.
Right. Because it's cold and windy a lot of the time.
A lot of the time, yes. And then that is just a little bit north of the town of Westport in County Mayo, which is probably one of my favorite towns on the route as well. It's one of those perfect Irish towns with like the colorful painted buildings, and there's always like flowers and I don't know, you know, you got the old stone churches. And,
photogenic.
Yes, very photogenic. But also, you know, a town that has hotels and restaurants and pubs and all of that fun stuff. Westport also has a cycling route, the Great Western Greenway is what it's called. And it basically goes from Westport up to Achill Island. So like if you wanted to do maybe like a bike trip or just like a short bike tour, that's a great place to do it, where you can say that you biked part of the Wild Atlantic Way.
Okay.
And then continuing on from there, Connemara National Park. You also have the famous Calmore Abbey. You can stop there and like take a tour and that sort of thing of this old abbey. And they have some really beautiful kind of manicured gardens, and I think they have a walled garden and some horses. And yeah, it's just one of those like if Jane Austen lived in Ireland. And then next is Galway, which is the largest city on the West Coast. I love Galway. Galway is so much fun. If you want to go out for like live music to a pub, literally, and just pick any pub in Galway.
Go anywhere. Just walk out of your hotel, pick the first one.
Yes, there will probably be live music there. And then from Galway, a popular day trip, which isn't on the Wild Atlantic Way, but probably worth mentioning, would be you can take a boat out to the Aran Islands, which are, again, just very dramatic islands. One of the best places in Ireland to go if you want to buy wool products. So Aran wool, you've maybe heard of Aran wool. It's very famous. And also they still speak a lot of Irish Gaelic out on the Aran Islands. So if you want to go to a place where it literally feels like you stepped back in time, where they're like sheep farmers making wool sweaters and they still speak Irish.
That would be a great souvenir.
Yes,
It's like a must-have.
Absolutely, yes.
Probably
for
very
sure.
warm too for the windy cliffs that you'll encounter.
Yes.
All along the way.
Continuing on, you're going to go through an area called the Burren, which are just this kind of mountainous area, but it's also a place where like glaciers have like carved out parts of the rocks. And then you get to the Cliffs of Moher, which people have heard of, I'm sure.
Listen, let me tell you about the Cliffs of Moher. I found them so breathtaking because they were so high. And I am not afraid of heights. And I had a real like visceral reaction to them. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm not afraid of anything like that. And they're so high.
Yeah.
It's really dramatic.
It's super dramatic.
Like, don't talk yourself out of going.
No, even
But
like people will tell you, oh, it's so touristy, but it's touristy for a reason. They're incredible. There's a great visitor center that has like lots of parking, exhibits inside, a cafe. They have like these walking trails along the tops, which sometimes they do close parts of them depending on what the weather is doing. But you could walk for miles in the summer just along the cliffs.
it really is beautiful. And there's those very cute photogenic cows
Yes.
all along the way. And there's sheep. And it really is like nowhere else.
And then from the Cliffs of Moher, the next kind of main site would be the Dingle Peninsula, which is the town of Dingle is on that peninsula. Another absolutely gorgeous, super colorful town. All the buildings are painted in like really bright, saturated colors. Cute town. Also on that peninsula is the Slee Head Drive, which is like one of the scenic drives you can do. Not sure if Angie would enjoy that because it is very narrow. And then you get to the Ring of Kerry and Killarney National Park. The Ring of Kerry is, again, like quite touristy. You'll find a lot of bus tours that drive that. And it's a driving route, but there's like things to see. Like you can stop. There's like castles and lighthouses and just scenic areas and that sort of thing. But if you go a little bit further along the Wild Atlantic Way, there's the Ring of Barra, which is similar to the Ring of Kerry, but much less busy. So if you wanted to just do one of those drives, maybe the Ring of Barra would be a little less busy. And all these driving, like these scenic drives, again, like they're part of the Wild Atlantic Way, but they might veer off of the main road. So again, it's kind of like it's part of it, but it's not just one highway that you're staying on the whole time.
It's kind of DIY. Whatever you're into, you kind of pick and choose. If you're into ruins, you can find lots of ruins. If you're into walks or hikes or treacherous bikes, every bike is a treacherous bike for me, let's be honest. You can kind of make it what you want it. It's not just one thing.
Yes. And there are lots of like hiking and walking options. If you wanted to go on a coastal hike, there are lots of options to do that as well. The last major stop on the route would be the Mizzen Peninsula, which is in County Cork. So it's close to Kinsale where it technically ends. And that there's like a lighthouse there and some hiking trails. And again, it's just like really beautiful scenery. So this is almost all the places on here are going to have some sort of coastal scenery, but then you also might have some inland stuff that's like mountains or green hills and sheep farms and castle ruins. And yes, there's so much.
It feels like the perfect place to go write like a crime thriller or a romance. You know, it gives that whole, I'm a tortured writer and I want to sit in half of a castle, you know, whatever's left. And I just want to feel the salty breeze and wind in my hair. Tell me about the Star Wars films.
Oh.
I'll make you say it.
There is an island called Skellig Michael.
Yes.
Which I think is what you're thinking
That's
of.
the one.
Yes, which was it's been pretty famous in Ireland, like as a place for tourism for a while, but it was made extra famous. It was in the last or second to last newest Star Wars film. It's the one where Rey finds Luke Skywalker and they do like she trains with him and it's on this beautiful, like they're always climbing up steps.
So you're saying it's a Jedi outpost.
It's a real place in Ireland. None of that was like CGI. That was 100% actual, real. However, it is off the west coast of Ireland. So yes, could be considered part of the Wild Atlantic Way. But you have to take a boat to get out there. And it's tough. Like it's a bit of a treacherous boat ride. And they are often canceled because of weather or like the sea swells might be too high. And so it's kind of like, I'm not even sure if you have a 50-50 chance of going.
Okay.
I've never gone because I've never been kind of at the right time of year where the weather's right or where the tours can run. but it is a place you can go that is now also Star Wars related.
We talked about weather.
Yes.
Now this is Ireland. This is the coast of Ireland. So it's probably not going to be sunny and hot. So
it could be.
It could be.
But probably not.
Yeah. So what should people prepare for? What's the best time to go?
It's going to be subjective, but generally the summer months in the Northern Hemisphere are going to be the most popular time to go. So like I'd say July and August are probably the busiest times, but anytime from May through September is probably the best chance of like good weather in Ireland, which is still going to include some rain and wind because it's not called the Emerald Isle for nothing. Like it does get a lot of rain.
It's green for a reason.
Right.
Yes.
But it's also an island. So like it's never going to rain. It could rain the entire day, but usually the weather blows through pretty quickly. So you could have multiple types of weather in one day. So I'd say you're going to want to prepare always for the chance of rain. So like a good raincoat, essential. Umbrellas, sometimes not that effective. So if you have a good raincoat with a hood, that's going to be better than anything else.
You would need to get one of those really intense umbrellas, right? That's guaranteed not to fly. You can't buy the cheap one at the airport. That's not going to work.
Absolutely not. Especially like if you're trying to use like an umbrella at the cliffs of Moher.
No.
Good luck.
You will be like Mary Poppins and fly away into the United States. Like off you go.
So a good raincoat, waterproof shoes, always a good idea. Because even if it's not raining, like if you're going to go hiking or even just doing some like coastal walks, it could be wet, it could be muddy. You never know. So waterproof shoes, probably essential. And then there are certain times of year, but midges are sometimes called like sandflies, or like they're these teeny,
no-see-ums?
tiny, yes.
Yeah.
Teeny tiny biting flies that can leave very itchy welts like mosquito bites. And there are certain times of year that they could be a problem in Ireland. However, it's so windy a lot of the time that like I've never had any issues with midges in Ireland, but it is something to just keep in mind that, you know, if it's not super warm, long sleeves, long pants are not a bad idea if you're going to be outdoors a lot during midge season.
Is it true that the southern part of the Wild Atlantic Way will have better weather?
Ireland is an island, so depending on the way that like the weather is moving, I feel like the north maybe gets a little bit more rain than the south. I will say though, like if you are not able to plan like a summer or even like a spring or early fall trip, if you can only go to Ireland in the winter, they don't get snow very often. Maybe up in the mountains they might get some snow, but there's generally not snow like we would get in some parts of the US. So you wouldn't need to worry about snow gear as much.